July 2nd, 9:50 p.m., 1947, 105 South Pennsylvania Avenue, Roswell, New Mexico. Dan Wilmot steps out onto his porch. From the southeast, he sees a large, glowing object zoom to the northwest. He called his wife out to watch too. They stood for 40 to 50 seconds, watching this round object travel hundreds of miles per hour until it was finally out of sight. Mr. Wilmot decided to keep this to himself, hoping that someone else had seen it and would report it. However, when that didn't happen, he decided to go report it himself. A few minutes after giving the details of his sighting, his community was shocked, but not by his report. The Roswell Army Airfield had announced that they were in possession of a flying saucer. What exactly crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in that July of 1947? Aliens. It was aliens. For my first foray into aliens, Roswell as the most popular seemed a good choice. I was right. There's a lot of intriguing information, events, and witnesses. I'm going to narrate the important parts of the story, go over what information we can pull from this, and then I will touch on credibility so you don't have to just take my word for it. For the sake of flow, I won't be going through all the reasons I included or excluded certain details or conclusions in the narration. The important bits will be covered in the credibility section, although if you have any objections, leave a comment and let me know. And a general reason for some exclusions is that this story has been told dozens of times already, and I don't feel a need to repeat stuff that will only serve to double the length of this video. With that out of the way, here are the events of the Roswell incident. A lot of theories on this event require us to go back to before 1947. To the end of World War II, the atomic bomb. I don't think I need to describe to you why it was a big deal, or why it was concerning. We decided to try out an entire other war right after where we played chicken with these things, and the theory goes that the aliens noticed, and were concerned. The Trinity UFO case is likely one of the best examples of this occurrence, but we should get back on topic. In the first week of July, there was an especially violent thunderstorm over this corner of New Mexico. While two alien ships were flying over to White Sands Proving Grounds from the north, one of the ships was struck by lightning. It veered off course into the other ship, and they both ricocheted off each other in separate directions. One went west, and the other went east. Both crashed. Both had survivors. They dragged their crewmates out. The one in the east was able to drag two out, making 3 in total. Maybe that's all there was. Maybe that's what was left. They were both already dead, and the one who remained was distraught. The situation in the western crash wasn't much better. They had 4 instead of 3, but an equal amount were dead. This time, one was so injured they had to be dragged out too. I'm not sure what happened to the 4th. The western crash was roughly between 1 and 2 miles away from Old Horse Springs in the plains of San Augustine. The eastern crash was roughly 5 to 15 miles in an easterly direction from the ghost town of Arabella. Now the military comes in. A member of an archaeology team alerted the sheriff at the western crash, and a fire was reported at the eastern crash. The sheriff has a pre-existing agreement to alert the Air Force of any potential crash locations, so he does so. They gather anyone they could at the base and send trucks to guard and retrieve the crashed crafts. The firefighters and police are told they are no longer needed and sent home. Witnesses are shooed away, but not forgotten. Everything is packed up and sent to Walker Air Force Base, and in Hangar 84, the bodies from the eastern crash are prepared for autopsy. Then 3 planes went out. A B-25 and a B-29 went to Fort Worth on request by General Roger Ramey for his own personal inspection. A few pieces were also sent to Washington, D.C. so they could get a good look at the debris. A B-29 went straight from Roswell to Wright-Patterson Airfield in Ohio with the bodies and remaining debris, and after they are done at Fort Worth, the rest of the materials are also shipped out to Wright-Patterson Airfield. While the official government story was initially that they recovered a flying saucer, General Ramey made sure to change it to finding a weather balloon. The one who flew straight from Roswell to Wright-Patterson pocketed a small piece of debris. While he wasn't the only one to do this, he might have been the only one who kept it. After the cleanup, the Air Force had already made the decision that this was not to get out. Probably some national security reason. I guess that argument would be more persuasive during the Cold War. But you have to wonder how much it justifies. Obviously, we already know about Project Artichoke, Operation Sea Spray, the Tuskegee syphilis study, among many other horrifying things with little to no justification. Let's not dwell on the reasons, and instead expose how far they went to finish their little cleanup operation. A rancher named Mac Brazel had debris from the crash on his property. Whether this was where the lightning strike happened or a site where the craft skipped akin to a stone on a lake is not known. Whichever it was, a lot of this thing had pieces here. And that was determined to be enough of a justification for officers of the base to throw him in jail for multiple days and nights. When he got out, he was threatened not to say anything. During that time, they threatened locals to keep quiet, as well as ransack their homes and local media offices for remaining crash site materials, or any related material for that matter, including files and notes. And to make extra sure no one talked, they threatened their lives, even if they were only 12. I'm going to play 2 clips from interviews that will hopefully give you an idea.
And he just said, look, mister, you don't go in and start any rumors in Roswell. Nothing happened out here. And he said, if you do, you know, it'd be real serious problems. And so I just, being as my character was at that time, I said, I'm a civilian, you can go to hell. And that's where he said, you may be the one going to hell. And then that's when he really told me, he said, somebody will be picking your bones out of the sand if you do that.
I want you to understand that you were never there. And I didn't understand what he meant, because this was kind of not a way of talking that we were accustomed to. And I said, yes, I was there. And he said, no, you weren't. And I said, yeah, I was there. And he had mentioned at first that he wanted to see the one who had seen the piece of material that they had been handling down at the station. And I said, yes, I did handle it. Then he started emphasizing, no, you didn't. Well, my mother was pretty strict, and we didn't lie. So I'm insistent that, yes, I saw it, yes, I held it. And he got mad, and the more I insisted I had seen it, he didn't just come out and say, this is not something you're going to be allowed to talk about. He was trying to get it through my head that I never saw it. And he got louder, and he had one of those, looks like a small baseball bat that hooks on the side of your belt, and he took that out, and he's holding it, and he starts beating his hand. Every time he said something, he would hit that on his hand, and he would say, I want you to understand, you were never there. You did not see anything. You did not hear a conversation. And he said, if you can't understand this, there are things that we can do. He asked Mother, he said, can she keep a secret? And Mother said, yes. She said, just tell her what you want her to do. And he said, well, first of all, you got to understand that if you ever talk about this the rest of your life, he said, there are things that we can do, and we'll do them now. We can take all of you kids. We will take you either to Orchard Park or to Artesia. Orchard Park was the German POW camp during World War II, and Artesia was the Japanese POW camp. And he said, but we don't have to do that. We don't even have to let you live. He said, we'd put you in one, we'd put your parents in the other one, but we don't have to do that. He said, we can take you out here in the middle of this desert. He said, no one will ever find your bodies, ever. No one will ever know what happened to you. And so he said, the only way I'm going to let you stay around or live is if you promise you'll never talk about this the rest of your life. So I told him I wouldn't. But that really was pretty much all that was involved. He was probably there at the house maybe 45 minutes to an hour. Mother sent me into the bedroom, and I don't know what he had to say to her afterwards. One of the other military police that was with him stayed in the backyard with the younger kids so they didn't come in the house while he was there. And I never discussed it again until recently. And I'm sorry, someday I will get over it. I haven't yet.
Your mother must have had a hard time explaining to you Obviously, you were raised to be honest.
She never talked to us about it. Never. It was never mentioned again.
From the time you came walking out of your bedroom?
From the time I went to the bedroom until the day she died, we never mentioned it. There was no conversation.
What about your father?
I never talked to him about it either. I'm sure they must have talked to him down at the station.
You must have gotten a good talking to.
I imagine he did. Excuse me just a moment.
That's okay. That's okay. Frank, you want a drink or something?
No, I just wish this whole thing would go away. It doesn't go away. And it doesn't get any easier. Because every time that I tell somebody about it, I feel like I'm 12 years old again. I can see the guy standing there with his sunglasses on, and he never took his hat off, and he never took his sunglasses off, beating his hand with that stick and threatening us. And at the time he did it, it was okay. Because we'd been through the war, we understood, and I didn't realize it was intimidation. I had no idea what it was until probably the last 5 years, actually. Because I never talked about it again. I never mentioned it to anybody. When this all came out and my kids found out about it, they were really upset with me.
Why?
Because I never told them about it. A husband who was very upset with me about it, too, because I never told him about it.
This aspect is just as important as the science. I think it speaks for itself. As for the aliens and their vehicles, I have compiled a description. ASP-20 are commonly referred to collectively as Greys and are intelligent extraterrestrial humanoid beings. They are 3 to 4.5 feet tall bipeds and have completely hairless, gray, semi-translucent skin. Greys have heads that are larger than that of a human head in proportion to the rest of their bodies, and are shaped like an upside-down pear, with the top being the larger portion. This species has very large black eyes that are oval-shaped when open and marginally slanted when closed. The eyes are set back into the skull, and the skull itself has a very different bone structure from that of a human. The skull is not made of typical bone, and is more akin to a heavy cartilage and very pliable. This ASP does not have a convex nose, and instead has a structure that is flush with the face and follows the natural shape of the head, leading to 2 small orifices above the lip line that act as nostrils. This species has very fine, very long, extremely thin lips. The mouth does not have teeth, and instead, the gums are hard, tough, and rigid, akin to rawhide. The ears do not protrude, and are instead 2 small orifices with 2 small lobe flaps for each side of the head. The ASP is very slim in stature. The arms are very small, fine, and delicate. The length of the forearm of the species is the length of its upper arm multiplied by 1.5. The arm bone is minimally smaller in diameter to that of a human finger. The hands don't have any thumbs and have 4 long, delicate fingers with no fingernails. At the tip of each finger, on the underside, there is a pad where human fingerprints would normally be, and in the pad there are minute suction cups used for gripping. This ASP pilots ASP-19. Pilots of ASP-19 wear shiny, silvery gray, tight-fitting one-piece suits that have no zippers, buttons, or insignias, with the exception of a seam on the shoulder around the collar. Halfway down the shin/calf section of the suit, it becomes less pliable and more sticky, like a form of built-in boots. This suit does not include any headpiece. ASP-19 is commonly referred to as a flying saucer. They are flying vehicles piloted by ASP-20, with instances of ASP-19 ranging from 15 to 35 feet in diameter. They are metal gray objects shaped like a discus with a dome at the top. The outside of the vehicle is lined with an extremely lightweight foil-like material that is less than 20 microns thick and burnished gray in color. In appearance, it is metallic, but not shiny or reflective. This material is a form of memory metal that will return to its original form without a crease or fold, provided that the outside force actively affecting its shape has ceased doing so. During the process of shape change or interaction, no sound can be heard by the human ear. This material is highly resistant to dense, cuts, and burns, and has exceptional resistance to blunt force impacts, showing little to no permanent deformation even if struck with a sledgehammer. When properly energized, this material will produce perfect illumination, providing an easy light with no shadows. On the interior of ASP-19 are structural parts in the shape of I-beams. These I-beams are made of a material that consists of narrow rectangular battens or slats. Visually, it exhibits a lustrous, matte, silver-gray finish, and is metallic, yet its overall form factor and properties resembles bamboo strips or wooden lathes. The material these I-beams are composed of is a silicon alloy and does not have a crystal lattice structure, and is instead an amorphous-like form. When fractured, the material exhibits a conchoidal fracture. These I-beams roughly range from 6 to 32 centigrams per cubic centimeter. These I-beams are often made to be over a foot in length and a 1/16 of an inch thick. The material is harder and stiffer than ST-37 steel, and, like the foil material, it cannot be burned or cut. This beam has an embossed purple-violet hieroglyphic symbols on the inside edges of it on the main frame itself. ASP-19 is also composed of a black-brown, bakelite-like, brittle light material that is a little over 1/16 of an inch in thickness. So one thing we can deduce from this description is that the planet they come from has lower gravity. In addition to the thin arms, one witness even stated it looks like they couldn't even lift 50 pounds. Now there is the possibility that they aren't used to lifting things, but they have fingers with suction cups, so we can surmise that they evolved to do so, making a lower gravity planet more plausible. The larger head on the smaller body supports this. That narrows our search if we are to try to determine where they came from. The large eyes could be indicative of a planet more than one astronomical unit away from their sun, or a world where living in darker places is advantageous, although it is too early to infer such things. The consensus among everyone who saw the Greys was that they are not here to hurt us, and it seems this event didn't scare them off from monitoring us. It wasn't long after that footage was taken of a UFO at Holloman Air Force Base, possibly the same kind as the one we see here, so we got some information about their biology, technology, and intentions. While knowing what planet they are from, how long they've been here, how many there are, where they are staying, etc. would be nice to know, I don't think this is the time or place to figure that out. I also excluded a few other theories and supposed evidence, including Blue Blood, Art Bell's anonymous material, the Scientologist book, Majestic 12, etc. I see them as either completely false or lacking information. Additionally, everything I used had to be corroborated, which is another reason for some exclusions. So the conclusion is aliens are real, might be pretty friendly, have advanced technology, and the government is hiding it from us. Not that surprising. But of course, why do I think this? I will go over 5 possibilities I went over that led me to the extraterrestrial origin conclusion, and the official stance on the matter, and the skeptical points that have been added onto it. So the 5 possibilities are extraterrestrial, cryptoterrestrial, time travel, government experiments, and interdimensional. I feel like we wouldn't evolve to be this weak and go back in time to monitor our own nuclear activity, so time travel is at the bottom of plausibility right next to the government experiment theory. There's no indication of technology nearly this advanced being developed during World War II or the 2 years after, let alone putting some experimental hybrid as the pilot. Now, cryptoterrestrial kind of overlaps with ancient alien theory, but I figure if aliens like this were from Earth, there would be more archaeological signs, and there wouldn't be a reason to hide their presence on their own planet for millions of years just because some apes are getting smarter. Interdimensional has some evidence in the Skinwalker Ranch sightings of UFOs flying through portals, but it isn't necessarily proof. Access to the 4th dimension is likely the level of advanced technology beings of this caliber may have, and could be the way they traveled so far to reach Earth if they are from a place far away in the universe. So it's more a case of figuring out whether an interdimensional being would also have flying vehicles that can travel in space where extraterrestrials would come from while accounting for our different physics, or if it's just aliens that have been around longer than us, enough to advance to this level of technology. Occam's razor says the second. So what's the credibility of this? First, let's discuss the witnesses. I personally was able to find over 50 witnesses just from some YouTube videos. Stanton Freeman was able to find over 100 alone. There are claims of 600 witnesses. I couldn't watch every documentary and read every book, but for now, I think we should be fine just going with the ones I personally found. In this list of people claiming to see strange metals, saucer-shaped crafts, and alien bodies are the following: 2 majors, 2 colonels, 1 lieutenant colonel, 1 sheriff, 2 first lieutenants, 1 reporter, 2 brigadier generals, 1 technical sergeant, 3 sergeants, 1 private, 1 captain, 1 officer, 1 master sergeant, and 1 metallurgist. These people aren't the type to lie for fun, especially not this many, and among that list is a metallurgist. So mistaken identity would be inconceivable, and these are just the standouts. Like I said, there were quite a few more. One of these listed is a Second World War veteran, a lieutenant colonel, a Bronze Star, and an Air Medal recipient who worked with top-secret nuclear weapons. He had absolutely no reason to lie. This man saw something, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what the official narrative they are peddling is. So let's go over the alternative story. Why do skeptics and the government say there was no aliens or manned aircraft, especially when the Air Force was the first to state it was a flying saucer? The official explanation by the government is that Roswell was a government cover-up. For those not acquainted with the story already, this will come as a shock. Well, the cover-up was not for a UFO apparently. It was for a top-secret project. This is what they used to explain all the shady secrets and, I guess, the reason for threatening 12-year-olds. It was called Project Mogul. Basically, a big balloon with a microphone for hearing nuke noises from a distance. Cold War stuff. Anyways, aside from the shady cover-up, how does this explain everything else? Well, they say the flying saucer announcement was a misunderstanding, and their official report concludes that Marcel and Blanchard's original flying saucer press release was in part an overreaction and in part due to the fact that flying saucer was a new term that didn't have a clear meaning yet. I'm not sure if they thought anyone would actually believe that. There are 2 times when researching this where the presenter's response was simply one word: bullshit. And this was one of them. The colonel didn't know what it meant during the flying saucer craze, when the name itself is literally a description of its shape and abilities? Skipping past that aptly labeled bullshit, how about the symbols described as alien hieroglyphics? Well, apparently, they matched the symbols on the adhesive tape that Project Mogul sourced from a New York toy manufacturer. The toy company in Brooklyn, commissioned to make the Raywin targets, used what it had at hand. That included kids' scotch tape, with flowered patterns set in a purple dye. After a few days in the desert sun, the scotch tape would have peeled off and blown into the desert. In such heat, the purple dye had imprinted on the wood, leaving behind flowered patterns on the balsa wood frame. For this one, I will include a visual of the recreation so you can get an idea of what it looked like. Now, the symbols are described as embossed and having a texture. Not sticky residue or faded paint, but symbols sticking out of the material that you could feel etched into the very metalwork. And their explanation for the charred alien bodies? Crash test dummies, from 10 years later. I'm not joking. The Air Force actually believe that witnesses are mixing up events from the mid-1950s with horrifying memories from years earlier. Also, these dummies were human, 6 feet tall in fact. The aliens are half that size. Their explanation is some dummies were discovered burned so their limbs are shorter. Now, some witnesses got close enough to touch the bodies. I think they would see if it was human-sized with missing limbs. Or from 10 years in the future, I guess. Sorry, this is hard to take seriously. There's also the testimony of the foster daughter of Colonel Hunter G. Penn, an Army Air Force officer who supposedly admitted to his foster daughter that he was tasked with enforcing an information blackout with a focus on the little bodies. He was authorized to use physical force and weaponry if necessary to get this accomplished. That admission doesn't get cleared by time blindness or a charred limb. They also say that the reason Marcel thought it was exotic material was because Mogul used radar wind targets, or Raywin for short. Well, he explicitly said the reason was the properties like memory metal, which Raywin doesn't have, so that makes no damn sense. Additionally, Jesse Marcel was part of Operation Crossroads, and the Raywin targets and the meteorological balloons were used as a part of the atomic testing, so he should have been familiar with the balloons. It's a neoprene balloon, and Raywin targets have been used for 20 years. They launched literally hundreds of them during the invasion of Okinawa. Neoprene rubber was standard in meteorological balloons. The idea that the Mogul array was something special or out of the ordinary is just plain stupid. As for the files on the incident, well, the government said they destroyed many Roswell files because they do this a lot with UFO files due to lack of space. Upon requesting files from the Roswell Air Force Base, from the year of the Roswell incident in 1947, it was found that all records from that time had been destroyed. And even more suspicious, the person or organization that had destroyed these files, and the authority under which they had done so, was not indicated. Even within Project Mogul itself, They have no documentation proving that what was picked up at Roswell was a Project Mogul balloon. Some point to Mac Brazel changing the story from the metals he found to being just sticks and rubber. While that would be suspicious enough given that it happened after he spent days in jail, his change of story was done under military escort. And later, when reporter Frank Joyce points out that his news story is much different than his original account, Brazel responds that it would be bad for him if he didn't tell the news story. Lastly, even within the official photos used to prove it was a weather balloon, there were mistakes. General Roger Ramey held a memo in his right hand during the photos. In the early 2000s, software had improved to the point that we could enhance the memo using the original negatives from the camera. In one of the photographs, the front face of the memo is clearly visible. The words that could be deciphered through analysis had words such as urgent, victims, wreck, and the name of Air Force General Hoyt Vandenberg. There were references to a disc to be shipped by B-29. The message then implies that they should mistake the meaning of the story and suggest sending out public relations officers with weather balloons. Now some skeptics point to minute details that seem like lies. For example, they say Marcel flew the UFO and that it can't possibly be true. Well, he did fly the UFO to Fort Worth, and that sentence structure is what got people confused at the time. He didn't pilot a flying saucer. He put the pieces in a plane, and then flew that plane and the pieces, thus flying the UFO over to Fort Worth. It was a grammatical confusion, not the smoking gun. Walter Haut talks about this in multiple interviews. Today I let a lot of the information speak for itself, but I'm not going to forget the way they threaten these people's lives. And I recommend Bob Gimlin's The Missing Scientist Case is so much worse than you think video if you want to hear about how they are willing to follow through. For the science portion, I apologize that I cannot contribute more than a description. I'll figure out how these things fly one day. And for credibility, well, I don't think I need to add any more. It's pretty clear that the Project Mogul weather balloon story is all just bullshit. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, and like if you enjoyed and want to see more like this. Goodbye.